she was busy. She was the president of the Women's Guild. She had a little store in the back of the church where she sold religious goods. She was on the library board. She was involved in all sorts of things in town, and she was just always busy. She was not, she didn't have a lazy bone in her body. She always had something to do, and always something to help somebody else.
And she was, from what you said, smart.
Oh boy, she was, Honey said that, Honey would say, I like to have fun. Your mom liked to study. She always had a book. She was always taking a class. She was always, and she was sort of street smart. She would give us $10 to go to the IGA for 20 things, and give us $10 and say you can keep the change. If you ever came home with more than a dime, she had failed. Honest to God, she knew the price of everything in that store, and she'd go, "Hey, oh, I got 7 cents." But the other thing was, one day she called me and Dennis into the kitchen. She said, have a look at this. She said, I've been shopping at the IGA Tommy Triumph for several years now, and I've been watching, and when he types in the tax, he doesn't look at the bill. And look at this, he always adds on $2 or $3 in the tax, or 50 cents, or whatever. He was cheating her for years, and she knew it. And Dennis and I were ready to go kill him. But she said, no, I'll handle it. And she did handle it in her own way.
What sort of things did she like to cook?
She was a great, what I would call a comfort cook. She made great, what we called stringy beef. She made lamb kidneys for my dad, who had stomach problems, couldn't eat anything else. She made caramels in a cookie sheet that were awesome. She made the best gravy you ever had. We would come home, and she made a coffee cake that was oh my God, great coffee cake. But we'd come home for lunch or something, she'd have baked a pie. And she was a great comfort cook. For dinner was meat, potatoes, and a canned vegetable. I don't think we ever saw a salad the whole time I was growing up. I don't think we knew what lettuce was until I was about 17. But meat and potatoes and a vegetable every night, and often dessert, even though it might have been something like junket, which is, water and a little bit of sugar, basically, and coloring. But we always ate well, and when we ate, we sat down at dinner to eat at 5:30, and that was a sacred time. We always said grace.
So, I understand that she was also, she could be tough.
She was tough. She was, her mother died when she was 4. She was raised by strangers, nice people, but strangers. But she had Honey, and the two of them figured it out together, how they were going to survive. And I give you an example of how tough she was. My friend Freddie Koludzik was in a motorcycle, or an auto accident, and he had a plate put in his head, and he was in the hospital for several weeks. And so we were all supposed to write a letter to Freddie and tell him, cheer him up. So I wrote a letter and I said, Freddie, don't worry about school, you haven't missed a thing. I was like 2 months into school. Well, Sister Andrea read that and went through the roof. Sent me down to the principal, Sister Dennis, and Sister Dennis was a great woman, but she was a stickler for English. When she came into the classroom, she would start every class with, a noun is the name of any subject, person, place, or thing. As a verb is a, and she would go through all the parts of speech, and boy, you had to know. Anyway, she looked at the letter and she said, you didn't mean this, did you? And I said, no, I was just trying to make him feel good. She said, well, you missed a comma here, and you should have a paragraph here, and I would put a semicolon there, and sent me back to class. So I went back to class, and Sister Andrea said, well, and I said, well, she corrected the English for me. And at 3 o'clock when I got out of school, my mother was there. She did not pick me up from school, but she was there that day. She said, get in the car. Well, she got in the car, and off to Glenwood School for Boys we went. The Glenwood School for Boys was this really scary place, surrounded by a shrubbery fence that was about 20 feet high, and about a 300-yard walk from the entranceway to this big stone building. And she pulls in. She get out. You're going to Glenwood. I'm like, you know. I got about 10 yards up. She said, well, maybe I'll give you another chance. So I hopped back in the car. And years later, I told Dennis that story, and he said, oh, did she do that to you too? She kept us all in check in her own way. But she was tough in other ways. You know, she lost 3 sons and her husband. She was hit by a truck, run over by a truck.
Didn't know that.
Yeah. Dragged truck coming around the corner. She was a pedestrian. Hit her, dragged her, broke her hip when she was about 80 years old.
Oh my gosh.
Survived that. She went through radiation the whole time I was in her belly. She said to the doctor, doctor, she had just had radical breast surgery, and she said, doctor, do you think it would be a problem if I was pregnant? He was like, wah! Yeah! But I went through the radiation with her, and she had me, and life went on, and then she had Vincent. Pretty remarkable. She said to all of us, you can run away if you want, but if you leave the last step and step onto that sidewalk, don't ever come back. And we all sat on that step at one time or another in our life, but nobody ever stepped off it because she was serious. But the other side of her toughness was this. When Vincent died, it was a horrendous, airlines were on strike, and it was very difficult to get there, and of course we were all completely devastated. And it happened around my birthday, and the next morning when I went to see him in his coffin in the living room, she had a birthday cake for me. She had remembered somehow, and somehow gotten a birthday cake for me. That's the kind of tough she was. She was on the phone one day when she was about 75 years old, and my dad walked by, and he noticed that she was taking shorthand, the whole conversation in shorthand. And when she got off the phone, she said, Mary, what are you doing? Shorthand. You haven't done shorthand in 45 years. She said, well, I've kept it up because you were born blind in one eye, and I was afraid you would always go blind and I would have to go back to work. So when she was 75 years old, she was taking shorthand.
Wow.
She was smart.
So you've also said that you get your sense of humor from your mom.
Well, she had a wicked sense of humor. Dick, for example, had to wear glasses when he was 3 years old. And people would say, oh, why does he wear glasses? And she'd say, well, because he's constipated. And one day we had a crabapple tree on the corner of our lot, and it had died, and she decided that we would paint it for Christmas, paint it white and hang some ornaments on it. So we're out there painting away, and a woman pulled up in the car and said, hey, Mary, what are you doing? She said, stringing beads. You know, she just had that kind of wicked sort of sense of humor. We went to our farm in Lemons, Missouri once, and Dutch Schoenig had a daughter, Annabelle, and Annabelle was a pain in the ass. I mean, she was really spoiled. And my mom was staying in the same room with her at night, and to get some attention, she said, oh, Mary, I think I'm going to throw up. Nothing. Oh, Mary, I think I'm going to throw up. Finally, my mother says, go ahead, you can't throw it this far. And that was the end of that. She just shut up and went to sleep. Oh, one more thing. She was maybe 80, 85, and I went back to Homewood to visit her. And we were walking uptown Homewood, and the Homewood Theater was still there. And Woody Allen's Is There Sex After Death was playing. So my mom looks up at the thing, not a word, just kept walking. We got about half a block away, and she said, I certainly hope not. She said, I want a big puffy cloud and a harp. So she had a unique take on the world. Oh, she was very, both my parents were very uptight about sex. It was not ever talked about. You never use those 3 letters in a row, ever. So one day my mother decided that I needed the sex talk. So she says, you know, Terry, in the morning, boys wake up sometimes, they're like, "Rrr, rrr." That was it. I sort of got what she meant.